Hi, everybody. Welcome to Zealzaddy. This is Story Talk, and tonight's episode is How Can Writers and Artists Earn a Living in TTRPGs? It is definitely, in my opinion, a kind of a hot topic. It's hard to talk about. I mean, we all had trouble talking about money with our parents. Well, it's no different when you're talking about it with your friends and your colleagues in the industry and all that. So I have amazing guests that are joining us tonight, including the Sunday night return of Luna, which I'm so excited about having on the show. You can follow us everywhere at Zealzaddy, except on TikTok, where we don't have anything posted yet. It's TikTok RPG, because somebody has it and hasn't done anything with it, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get it. It's so annoying. Earlier this week, I did a couple of threads about budgeting for TTRPGs, and on Twitter, or a supplement, and part of that was calculating costs of paying creators. And I did it kind of as a preamble to this show, in that it talked about fairness in pay, working with creators, and all that kind of stuff. I'll drop a link in during the show, but I think it's kind of an interesting info thread. I do them every now and then when I have something to talk about. I realize that this is a niche industry, which this definitely is a niche industry, and it feels like it has all these millions of people, which it does, but unlike most industries, only 1 in 6 of the people in the industry actually buy any product, because only one of the 6 is a person running a game. But then there's publishers, and most of the people here are working for publishers or websites that are providing information and content also. So I think those are all really interesting conjunctions of earning a living in the industry we all love. So I'm really excited to have the amazing speakers we have on here tonight, guests. Question is can you actually make a living in this industry unless you're working for one of 2 or 3 companies? So let's get our guests on. Oh, one other thing. During our intermission, I show off a lot of Kickstarters and crowdfunders and things like that are going. I'll drop links in. If any of them you find interesting, click to them, go check them out. Maybe back something or follow them if they're getting ready to get started. But I just want to remind you, every picture tells a story. So let's see who's in all the picture frames tonight. All right. Some of my favorite people are here tonight. It's amazing. Hi, everybody. Why don't we let them all go around and say who they are, where you can find them, and the interesting things they're doing. In light detail, of course. We'll get into some of it as we go. Why don't we start with Luna, and we'll go around clockwise. So.
Oh, man. Throwing me right out there.
Right
huh?
in.
All right. I am Gamer Mom Luna. I am a writer, interviewer, reviewer, I guess, for the website shadowmain.com, SHADOMAIN.com. And you can find me on all the socials at GamerMomLuna, Twitter, Instagram, Dice Camp for Mastodon. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of stuff over there, and doing let's see, I think I have a charity stream coming up in a few weeks that I'll be playing in. So yeah, doing lots of stuff just around the community and hyping up other people still. So yeah, that's me.
All right, Kayla.
Awesome. I'm Kayla. I'm also known on the internet as DM Dalliance, depending on how long you've been following my stuff. Oh gosh, what all do I do? If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at JustThinkingK. My link tree is in my profile, which leads off to like a zillion different things because I can never just do one thing. I am also the newest member of UO Publishing, and I have a actual play starting tomorrow night on Paracosm Entertainment. We're doing our first one-shot in the Indie System TV the RPG. And I would be remiss and probably have a lot of chat pop up in my Discord if I didn't also remind you all that this month, wow, it's April already, we're launching a Kickstarter, we being UO Publishing, with this fantastic, setting in Haro going on. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. It's got to get released soon. It's driving us all crazy, me and others. All right, Jackson.
Yeah, I am Jackson Wagner. Do a lot of different TTRPG stuff. Most recently, I worked on the teams that released Nocturnes and Nightmares and Beyond the Golden Vault, now known as Runic Press. And tomorrow, our Kickstarter for Thimbleton Inksquire's Runic Compendium goes live. So it's a whole new magic system for 5e, features runes and languages and just horrific monsters, and just a lot of really, really fun stuff. So you should definitely check it out. Outside of that, I also do design in my main job working at World Walker Games. We made a game called Wildermyth. I do design and QA work. So kind of both video game and TTRPG worlds at the moment.
Awesome. And Dan.
Hey, I'm Dan. I guess the most relevant thing I've done recently is I recently started a YouTube channel about tabletop RPG design through the lens initially of homebrew called Untested Arcana that you can check out. I try to make one video every Sunday if I can make it happen. Not so great at it right now. I've been a writer and game designer for many years. Started doing TTRPG stuff when the pandemic started, weirdly. That was when I sort of finally had the free time to build out the kind of stuff that I've been thinking about. And I'm excited for this conversation. I think I'm going to have a strange perspective. I'm excited.
All right, B.
Hi, everybody. I, as you can probably guess, am B. You can find me on Twitter and, oddly enough, on Twitch, although I don't stream, at Brassic Arts. And if you wander over to Twitter and you go into my profile, my link tree is also in my profile there, and that'll link you to DeviantArt, ArtStation, a lot of the major art hosting websites. I'm a freelance TTRPG artist, like Daniel, a little bit of an anomaly here. I primarily actually am a data analyst on the side. But with that said, this has been a hobby that I really started to take more seriously once the pandemic hit. I had always done art, but then I decided, what if? And I took the plunge. And while I still honestly do freelance work, I've managed to get a couple of books out as a co-writer and as an artist. So A Botanical Guide to Barovia and oh my goodness, forgot my own book's title. How did I do that? Regardless, I've done a couple of botanical themed books with Shango Games on Twitter. Additionally, I worked with Never Not DM, aka GM Ben, on Professor Gilroy's Guide to Fae, and did a couple of guest pieces on Professor Gilroy's Heavenly Handbook. And I got permission to say this today. I am most proud of a piece that I did for the upcoming Ormpur the Saffron City, a setting book for Forgotten Realms that is coming out in summer of 2023. So,
Awesome.
And yeah.
That's not even that long from now. That's just a few months. That must be amazing. An amazing feeling. If anybody has questions, you can please drop them in chat. I will ask, please put question before it so it's easy for me to spot. I don't have anybody adminning the chat, so I have to go find them myself. But thank you all for coming. I have a few questions to lead in because I have questions. I'm sure that everyone will have questions as we go. So I'll start with something really kind of nice. Do you remember the first time you received income from a TTRPG thing? Something you were writing, art for? To me, I think those are cathartic moments. You're like, oh my God, I got a paycheck or whatever, a Cash App payment. Anybody can start.
So mine was bittersweet. I had just released a druid subclass of the avocado, and it was a subclass themed around the avocado entirely. So you got avocado themed subclass abilities. It was kind of a joke, but I was like, you know what? It's funny, whatever. And I put it up for pay what you want, and I got 1 cent from it. Someone paid specifically 2 cents for it, and then DM's Guild got 1 cent, and I got the other. And I was like, on the one hand, wow, they thought that was worth 2 cents. I almost wish they just downloaded it for free. But on the other hand, now I have 1 cent, so I'll take it.
Wow, you were legitimately paid the least someone could pay. That's amazing.
Yeah, since there's no more hay pennies, that's the least you can get.
If they could have, they would have.
And
I can
that's
go.
only because drive-through had to get paid.
Yeah.
I was on I was in the middle of San Francisco actually when we put out our first book. Nope, sorry, I wasn't. Yeah, I was in the middle of San Francisco when we put out our first book, and also at the same time there was a charity stream that was being done. And as a way to sort of get my name out there, I had done some free portraits for this particular charity stream, and I remember sort of simultaneously getting DMs on Twitter going, we got our first sale on a botanical guide to Barovia. And I'm sitting in the backseat of this car, like on the middle of Market Street. Like, it was absolutely surreal. It was $2. I mean, it was not that big of a deal, but it was like on both sides, suddenly like, oh gosh, there are a couple of hundred of people looking at my work on this one thing, and I got $2 on this other thing. It was very, very surreal for me.
Yeah, I kind of purposely avoided looking at the money stuff for a while because, like, you have to go look at the report to see the breakdown of what you get if you're posting in, like, DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. But I think the first project I ever did was Animal Sidekicks. I think that was the first ever thing with Adam. he let me design, I think I did the Death Dog sidekick stat block for the death dog, so you could actually have him as an animal companion, and you know, animal companions tend to beef it in the current way they're set up.
Yeah.
So we ran them as sidekicks, and I think that was actually like the first thing that I got. That eventually, when I got over my like, I'm not looking at it, when I ran the report, we actually had some money from it. It's a decent amount. I think it's a best gold seller now, if I remember correctly.
I worked on a supplement, a 5e supplement with plot hooks called Villagers. And there was a group of us that worked on it. And we were very excited when it went live. And I think I have probably made a grand total of $10 off it. That was just because of, you know, like it was sort of portioned out based on like how much writing everybody did and that sort of thing. And I did not do a huge amount. I submitted 2 NPCs for it. Other people did 3 or 4, you know, so it was sort of divvied out that way. But yeah, I remember the first time I logged into to Drive-Thru after it went live, and I was like, hey, I've got a few bucks in here. That's kind of cool. Like, oh, I can buy something at a discount now. So, yeah. But I mean, honestly, the majority of my income came through Twitch and Patreon for my Twitch. Just not even writing about stuff, but streaming about TTRPG content. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I can go because I have a strange thing to admit, which is this moment you're describing just happened to me because I realized I had never looked at the things I made on Drive-Thru RPG. So I just did. I just signed in for the first time in like 2 years. Turns out I have $30. So I'm going to go buy someone's thing for $30.
Nice.
Great. But yeah, you know, I am very fortunate in that I have worked in and around game design like my whole career. So I've you know, made money from designing games, not specifically tabletop RPG games. So the when I started to do this, I guess I hadn't considered that I might make any money from it. I'd sort of always imagined that this was an exercise in portfolio building or just game design practice. But I mean, even now, like looking at this report, which I've never looked at, doesn't have any of my titles. These are the 4 things that I contributed to. So I contributed to a Magic Shop catalog and the Glitter Grimoire. And like, that's where all of this is coming from. It's other people who are, you know, publishing more frequently, more successfully, that I was lucky enough to be, you know, added to their projects. So yeah, what's a good? Someone in chat. What's a good $30 thing on Drive-Thru RPG? I got it's burning a hole in my pocket.
If any of you have anything under $30 in chat, you should
It
drop
could
it
be
now.
more than $30. A discount
Villagers
is
is only $9.99.
There you go.
right.
So you
down.
could pick up that and
need 2
something
more.
else.
Yeah.
Nocturnes and Nightmares, $20 right there.
Oh, we've done it. That's $30. I hope no one else had anything.
I was going to say there's a great little publishing company called Underground Oracle.
I've heard. I follow them on Twitter. They seem amazing.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
We don't know anything about them.
Not,
We did
not
get
at all.
we got a question a moment ago. Have you turned down paying work for any reason? Like, has there ever been any reason you've paid down work, art, writing, whatever in the industry?
I turned down some NFT stuff.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
We applaud that.
Yeah. It's easy to turn it down when they're like, would you like to be paid in Bitcoin? No. I turned down a few different NFT things.
Very nice.
I never have, but I definitely there are things that if somebody said this is what it is, or not that I don't do art, so the odds of me being offered something to work on an NFT, no, that wouldn't happen. But there are probably things that I would be like, yeah, no, that's outside of my comfort zone or whatever, but I never have, but I've never been in a position to need to either.
Yeah, currently I've been in the position of either submitting to something that I think is really cool that I want to be a part of project-wise, making my own projects, or partnering with a publisher like Transparent Games or UO Publishing and being like, hey, let's do a thing together, me and you. So it's never been them coming and be like, hey, do you want to do this thing? We'd be like, no, thank you. I look forward to the day when I can be in that position.
You don't understand. I don't have to do it anymore. No.
I've definitely turned down not paying work. As an artist, you get a shocking number of requests of the, hey, I want this thing, but I don't want to pay for it. And I'm like, tempting, but no, sorry. To memory, though, I don't get a lot of offers for people to, do X, Y, and Z, but, every once in a while there's a request for an artist and I'll get tagged into the discussion, and it's not really a project that I want to work on. In those cases, though, if it's something that's out of my comfort zone, I kick it to people that I know do work on that kind of thing. Because as you all said, we're a small industry. We've got to pay it forward. We have to know, especially in the artist sphere, who does what, who's comfortable with what style. And it's actually been really cool in building a community.
Yeah, the other way. Yeah, the other thing that I think comes up for artists and writers is would you do work for just royalties or for clients? And I think that Drive-Thru RPG and DM's Guild has made it very easy to set up royalty arrangements where they're auto paid and all that kind of stuff. But I think I'll let you answer it because I have my own thoughts on it.
That's how I started out. I started out knowing I'm probably not going to get a lot of money from this, but the more projects I do, they'll all kind of snowball together. But now I'm in a position where I have a lot of projects personally. I'm also, I work with UO Publishing and things like that. And occasionally I get tagged by other people I've worked on things with that I'm in a position to be like, I either fully want 10 cents a word if you want me to write, 10 cents a word if you want me to be an editor for both grammatically, spelling wise, and development, because I can do development editing for them. And if I really, 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 really like the project, I might offer them a combo, if they can't do that 10-cent word, to kind of make up the difference. Or if I'm this thing's going to sell like hotcakes, I might offer the profit sharing. But the profit share is always kind of a gamble, right? You never really know how well a project's gonna sell. You might think but until it actually starts selling, you start seeing the numbers, you don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a good example out there in the industry where that stuff can go awry, where you take royalties on instead. Is like, I mean, I hate to even bring it up, but a few years ago, the Satine Phoenix stuff was kind of a lesson in PR can cause a disaster to a project you put a lot of work into, where it doesn't even make it to market after you've done all the work. You know, yeah, I always thought royalties. I would do them for somebody I trusted was going to put all their marketing muscle behind and try and push, because I mean, you're taking a risk. You want to make sure that they feel like the risk is worth it for them to do it too. So,
and I mean, from the other side, just real quick, because I know everyone probably has thoughts on profit sharing versus rates. But like, if you're doing a project and you're in a position where you're like, I can't pay someone $1,200 to do a thing, right? Like, you have to realize that yes, you can offer them a profit share, but you also have to be okay with that person saying, I'm not in a position to take just a profit share risk on this project. They might love it, and you might really love your project, but if you're both not on the same page with taking that risk, you might just have to find someone else to help you with it.
Yeah, when I made my first like big solo project on Drive-Thru RPG, I really didn't have an understanding of like what sales were likely to be or how this industry like really worked, and I felt like, oh, you know what, I'm going to take the plunge. I dropped like, I'd say like $500 on commissioned artwork. I was like, I'm just going to pay because I don't want to frankly insult this person by being like, hey, would you draw this thing for somebody who has no followers? And I paid for it. It was great. The art was amazing, and I put it in, and then it generated. It makes it sound like the art fault. It's not the art's fault. It's my fault. It didn't generate any sales because first time writer designer in this space. It definitely made me realize like, oh, yeah, there's risk here. There's risk that I wasn't thinking about. I was like, yeah, like $500. What if I make $2 a thing? I sell 1,000 of them. I could make that. No, I cannot make that happen. And after that, that's when I started to get into, trying to collaborate with people who just wanted to do the royalty share thing. That became a comfortable space for me. That isn't necessarily a comfortable space for everyone because, I'm lucky enough to have a full-time job. That $500 was like, I guess I won't, buy this other thing. It wasn't an important $500 to me, but it could be important for someone else. And it would have been important at different times of my life. I was always a big fan of the royalty share thing because it meant I just could work on stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to contribute to stuff and want to have to worry about, can this person afford to pay me? So they don't need to. I'm just going to do my little part. But again, that's a position of some privilege that I can choose to do that. Not everyone can choose to do that.
Yeah. I was gonna say I very much understand folks who, if they're artists who make their livelihood off of commissions. There's no way I'm gonna ask them to do potentially months of work without pay up front. That's like, I wouldn't say yes to that. There's no reason for me to expect them to. And the team I've been working with, we work on a royalty share method. And it works for all of us because most of us have a full-time job other than this. So it's for all of us, it's kind of this like, yeah, we all want to put in work on this. That's great. And occasionally we'll purchase kind of like art bundles that we'll be able to use. But otherwise it is kind of just we would understand that people who need this for to exist, we're not going to try to push off paying them. But for where we are right now, we just don't really have the money to do that. So we have to find people who want to, do it for the inevitable or potential, the not inevitable royalty spread.
It really depends on the scope of the project for me, and how much I really want to do it as well, as Kayla said. So with Shango, he and I both have full-time jobs in the same industry. This is not our primary income. So we royalty split because I know that he will get the majority of the writing done and I'll go through and edit and add my own. He knows that I will get the art done, and we have that sort of mutual trust that's built after doing multiple projects together, putting stuff out and actually having a moderate amount of success with the stuff that we do put into DM's Guild. With other projects, I'll give you an example. The thing I did with Professor Gilroy's Guide to Fae, that was a lot of art. That was like 40 pieces of art. It took me months to do that much. And in that particular case, he paid a really fair rate and gave me a portion of the royalty.
wow.
For something like that, it was a really generous offer. I really didn't expect him to pay as much as he did up front and at the end of the project. But, that's, in my experience, kind of a rarity. Usually it's like a negotiation where some upfront just to get me invested into the project, etc. Because if you know that you're working on a paying project, it's really difficult to motivate yourself if you don't see anything in return for it. And then to sort of offset that cost, if I'm sure that it will sell fairly well, I'll ask for, 5-10% of the royalty at the end.
Yeah. Nice. So off of the payment part, what's your relationship with the dreaded word deadlines?
I love deadlines, and again, sorry, I have the.
Was that the
privilege-
whooshing sound of the deadlines going back over your head?
No, I have the privilege to love deadlines because I have a job where the hours are really flexible. So for me, if I get to a week before a deadline and I see, okay, I need to get this done, I can say, all right, I'll find another time to do my main job work. And I'm just very fortunate to be able to do that, and I get it done. But for me, the deadlines are really critical to the stability of a project because it can feel so easy, even if you have these grand designs of a project that spans across, 6 months. People can lose interest. It can fall apart if you don't have, strict moments of coming back together and saying, okay, where are we at? Where are we at? Where are we at? So I think without them, it can be really hard, especially, when you're not seeing these people face to face or you're not even talking to them every day. The deadlines are critical to having a coherent project in any real period of time.
Yeah, and as a neurospicy, deadlines are the only way I get anything done. And Jess, I know you're watching. Look at me. Deadlines. That's a large portion of my job now is making sure we all understand where we're heading, how we're getting there, what the deadline is that we need to hit. And it works really well for myself too, because I have decided to walk the tightrope of balancing publishing my own stuff and occasionally freelancing with working with a publisher. So I need deadlines to be okay, I have to get this Rogues Gallery done before the 20th because I need to get layout done to be able to publish it the 10th on the following month, every single month. And if I get that done early, then I can pivot and work more quickly on the things I have to do for maybe UO or this other project I know I've got 2 months to do. So literally the only way I survive is deadlines.
Yeah.
I'm on the ADHD train. And if you know somebody on the ADHD train, give them a deadline and then check in, because it's really easy to do the out of sight, out of mind thing. On top of ADHD, I also have the fun seasoning of depression. So sometimes it gets more interesting when I know I really want to do a project, but I just stare at my iPad because I cannot do the art. So it's a love-hate relationship that I have with them. I absolutely need them to succeed. However, sometimes it's a struggle.
I think there's a secondary benefit to deadlines that I kind of discovered the hard way multiple times in a row, which is that, and actually I'd love, maybe correct me if I'm mistaken, but I've always felt this industry, it moves very fast, and it's somewhat like, like social media content creation. There are trends, there are releases that are not up to you. I'll give an example. Icewind Dale comes out when it comes out. If you're making a supplement for Icewind Dale, and you miss your deadline, you're not catching that wave of enthusiasm the weekend that all the DMs buy the book and then go onto DM's Guild to get supplements. If yours isn't on there, you're out of luck. You shouldn't make your supplement you should make your supplement 2 months later, but that happened to me a few times, specifically with Icewind Dale. I was making Arctic stuff, and then I just kind of didn't work fast enough, and then it came out. I was like, well, never mind. And then the weird thing that happened to me, and this is slightly outside the realm of tabletop design, is I had this idea to make a YouTube channel about making homebrew, and I wanted to do it very specifically for D&D Beyond. Nobody makes any content for the D&D Beyond homebrew system. It's basically just a big trash can full of terrible homebrew, and I don't see any influences putting stuff up on there. And I procrastinated on that project for 1.5 years, and the weekend I started was the weekend of the OGL controversy. The weekend everyone canceled their D&D Beyond subscription. And I was like, oh, if I'd actually made this when I had the idea and written the first script, maybe this would have been a good channel. And now I've had to, I've cut all the D&D Beyond content out of what I've been making in the last couple months because it's bad time. And keeping up with deadlines in an industry that moves this fast means you don't miss the boat on stuff.
Yeah. And it's hard to do because we don't write social posts. We write 5,000 word supplements or
you make a half-hour video
30,000 word books. Or
yeah,
these are no joke. This is authorship more than just writing. So it's big. You really have to find a way to I can't see many writers that are successful that are binge writers. I think you have to be more, you have to be better at pacing and, building it out over time, or else you're poor editors. All right. So we did get a question in chat. From Jess. Thank you, Jess. What do you feel is your best hidden gem among the work you've done? Something that you're especially proud of that maybe hasn't gotten the spotlight as other works in your catalog or portfolio.
So, honestly, my most recognizable stuff has been Nocturnes and Nightmares and Beyond the Golden Vault, working with a team to make that stuff. And honestly, that has shaped a lot of my view on how to go about being a content creator in this way. But one thing I made that I was really proud of, it was a custom class, and it was called the Spiritfarer, and it was inspired by the game Spiritfarer, where your whole thing is you find these kind of disembodied spirits, and you kind of guide them to a point where they are comfortable with letting go and moving on to beyond. And while they're with you, you gain aspects of their skills or abilities. And so you had all these different spirits, like the Tyrant or the Queen or the Hunter. And so you get various skill proficiencies as you advance through the levels. And you could choose whether to have kind of you go after evil spirits as a warden and kind of, redeem them, or you try to, become one with them as an avatar and kind of merge yourself and become this kind of half celestial creature. And I put a lot of work into it, and I have 2 players who are playing it right now, and it just turned into one of my favorite things I've ever made, because not only the mechanics behind it are really fun, but the role play potential as a DM, getting to play as the spirits in your NPC in your players' heads, and getting to have those relationships develop alongside NPCs in the outer world. And a big part of the class is that at certain levels you have to let one of your spirits go, and it's kind of acknowledging that it's not just for you. You're not just holding on to them for their mechanical abilities, and if you are, you gotta say goodbye at some point. So yeah, I was really proud of that, and it didn't do terribly. I got 40 or 50 sales, but I was like, man, I thought that was a really good idea, and I still think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, cool.
I actually have 2, and I know the one that Jess wants me to talk about, so I'll mention that first. Dark Reflections on the DM's Guild, which is a massive book. We had 12 writers on it. We took your classic fairy tales and thought, what if Happily Ever After wasn't actually the end of the story? Or what if the Happily Ever After had never happened? So essentially the princess or the main character in the fairy tale became an antagonist because of things that happened, and what those stories would look like. So we have things where I nicknamed the one I wrote Cinderella, because it was Cinderella, the classic tale is terrible, her dad dies, all these terrible things happen, but what if the only way she could gain back power to be able to make her situation better was to make a deal with a fiend? What if that was her only option? And then she had to, part of her deal was arranging to do contracts on behalf of that fiend, so that fiend got more power, more souls, whatever. So what would that look like? We had a child psychologist who did the Hansel and Gretel story for us. So it is massive. It's got 12 stories in it. We have artwork, we have magic items, we have an adventure per fairy tale. I want to say princess, but not all of them are. We have like the Zorro type adventure in there. We have Hansel and Gretel. But we have things like Little Red Riding Hood, Snow White, different twists on those. And then another one that I'm really proud of, which I'm bringing back in a different form, is I did DM Dalliance's Monster Compendium for spiders and ghosts on the DM's Guild. I'm bringing those back as DM's Dalliance's Monster Analysis for Monster of the Week. So we'll have spiders, ghosts, hags, kobolds, ettercaps, all kinds of things in that when I relaunch that.
I did a very silly magic item that I really like. It So you know those butter cookie tins that everybody is like, does it have sewing supplies or actual cookies in it? I made one of those into a magic item, and you roll a D100 for it, and you pull out like different crafting supplies based on what you roll. Although if you roll a 96 to 100, you get actual cookies that provide healing. So
I love it.
It was just something like stupid and goofy and fun that came up, like it was like that meme started circulating again, and I was like, how come we don't have one of these in D&D? And so I sat down, I wrote it over the course of like, I don't know, maybe 3 hours in total. And that most of that was like trying to come up with stuff that you could get in it. So it's like, one of the things that you roll is like pocket glitter. And another thing that you get is like, leather hide scraps. So like some of it's useful, some of it not so much. Some of it might be a spell component. And then, yeah, if you roll like a 96 to 100, you get butter cookies that do like 4 points of healing or something like that. So yeah, and I think you get 2 of them. So either you can eat them both and get 8 points of healing, or you can like divvy them up between 2 people. And yeah, that was
cool.
fun. That's pay what you want on my Ko-fi store if anybody's interested.
I love that sort of stuff. I don't want to call them useless because they're not useless. I like odd, cozy magic items.
Yeah, and somebody was like, oh, aren't they going to like just abandon it and like just keep opening it and whatever. So I made it so that it was like a single use a day kind of thing. So so that way you can't just keep popping it open and hoping for cookies. So
Yeah. We did get a question in from Big Bis ... And I think I'm going to modify a little bit since I do like to stay on topic, but there is something on topic there. And the question is, what are ways mechanically you find that helps engage players in role play and getting them to role play? But I'm going to move it a little bit into, as a writer, what do you do mechanically to promote role play in what you write? Yeah, I think it's not really for the artists unless the artists have a way they do it too, which maybe.
With my answer, I have to give credit to the person I learned it from. So props to the Matt Colville video where he talked about, and it's kind of a related issue of trying to get people to care about your lore. And it's, you make them care about the lore if the lore is important to what they want. And so the same thing with mechanically, you give them mechanics that can only, the full nature of them can only be unlocked through interaction with your world or your lore. And you essentially give them a taste of something really, really cool and the promise of potential gain with it. But to get that, they need to, do these things. So for example, in my current campaign, I've written these extremely powerful, artifacts of armor that these players can acquire. But to do so, they have to get these like 5 or 6 seemingly completely random objects. Like one is a stone from a bridge, getting someone to laugh at a joke, like just completely varied requirements. And it's led them into these really fun roleplay moments that came from their want for something mechanically powerful, essentially. So it kind of feeds into itself. You give them mechanics that reward them for interacting with your world and make them want to get more. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on a couple of projects that really dive deep into an aspect of that. Adventures Domestic Handbook and Lovers in Arms. We did a bunch of like romanceable NPCs, and in that same vein, we built the mechanics of how do you build a relationship with someone? Like, what does that look like? You know, how do you get to know someone? And the more things you did with or for, we gave little like mini quests you could go on that would like bump up your relationship status if you wanted to with the NPC, almost kind of like mirroring some of the video game aspects of it, where like you know, if you don't have a certain relationship status unlocked, you can't necessarily have that conversation yet, or you don't find out that tidbit about them yet. And that, you know, players always go after the unusual NPC, even if it's not the NPC related to anything that you're doing. So we wanted to provide a book that was just a whole set of those, so that if they did become super interested in that random goblin that's the tavern keeper and wanted to get to know them, you could be like, oh, okay, like here's the stats for that. Here's their whole backstory if you want to learn about it. Here's the things it can help you with. Here's the things they need help with. And kind of like pull those aspects in and make it easier for a DM to just drop that into a game.
Yeah, I think I've employed a similar, idea of, in some ways, just giving a better sense of backstory to the fictional things that you're creating. I worked on a couple of projects that there's a series of monster books called Holodanger. It's a bunch of holiday themed monsters. We release them sort of periodically over the course of a year and change. And something that was really great was that we had the space to not only make monster stat blocks, but to write like some lore and to write some adventure hooks, and to just give a better sense of like when they encounter this gelatinous cube made of Neapolitan ice cream, what's that? Why does it exist? And like, I wrote a little thing about a wizard who had, accidentally created this in trying to make an unlimited source of ice cream. And like, it just gives a little bit more, because in a lot of ways, I think you mentioned this way at the top, primarily the people buying these products are DMs. So You're not making tools that directly help players roleplay. You're making tools that allow DMs to run a game better to encourage roleplay. And one of those things is for the world to feel real and fleshed out, and you can give DMs that by giving them more details. And like that, a book of backstories for random characters. Actually, I just was going through Keys from the Golden Vault, like the newest book, and in one of the missions, you go to a thieves guild, and in the book, they just put 12 random thief names. Silly names, like Jimmy Sack of Donuts kind of stuff. But honestly, so good for my players to be like, who was that guy? And I don't have to go, Kyle. His name was Kyle. Because that is, I always just drop to just sort of boring names of kids I went to middle school with. And that's no fun. I want cool names, and I'm not good at names. So yeah, making tools that allow DMs to quickly make the world feel more real is going to help players engage with it.
Kind of going off of that, one of the things, so yes, I was primarily an artist, but I did do the editing, and I co-wrote both of the Magical Plants books that I did with Shingo Games. And whatever we put in there, whether it's a plant or a magic item or whatever, we tried to do here is the item, but here is how you could use it. And so like we will pepper the book here and there with little narratives to give inspiration. And Shango is really great at this. And if you don't know him, you should absolutely look him up on Twitter. But he will create an entire set of quest hooks and an entire mini adventure that utilizes everything that we created in the book in one place. Just to give an example of how these things could be used, or, in a lot of cases to just drag and drop it from the book directly into the campaign. And I've used it in my own groups, and it's worked out like really beautifully just to have all of those examples there with how to use it, how much these things are, how they would even give the sales pitch in a lot of cases. So that's, yeah.
Nice. Did anybody else want to answer any more on there? I don't know if everybody had a chance to answer. If not, we did get a question from Shadowmane. outside of profits based on sale from publishing, what other ways do you know of to extend the possibility of income, of money? I mean,
Community. That's
what?
community building. That's literally the answer that you're looking for, because you can have as many products as you want, but if no one knows it exists, or there's not examples of out there of it being used, or if people don't follow you to or know that you do, like for UO, we pivoted to doing Cypher stuff. So if no one knows we're doing Cypher stuff, it doesn't matter how great the Cypher stuff is that we put out. There's just not going to be sales there. So we've started partnering up to make sure like we know the community knows us, and providing that opportunity so that people know, oh, if we want to see a cool monthly short collection, we just go check out UO Publishing now, because they have a volume collection that comes out every month for it.
Yeah. I think part of the question is also like, what other sources of income do you have other than just publishing? Like Patreon, for instance, is another source of income that is not directly publishing necessarily.
Streaming.
YouTube.
So for people who don't know me, who aren't familiar with me, I ran a stream for 3 years, for about a year and a half on other people's channels before finally bringing it back to my own channel. When I moved it to my own channel, and was getting my own subs, and was able to start a Patreon for it, I brought in, again, it's not a huge amount of money, but I brought in over $600 in Twitch subs alone last year. And, my audience wasn't huge. That was for roughly 25 to 30 viewers weekly. So I can definitely see how, like really large streamers can pull in a substantial income. YouTube is not as friendly to paying creators. You have to, before you can even monetize, you have to hit like 1,000 followers and or subscribers and a ton of other stuff. So Twitch, if you're going to even look to pivoting to YouTube, I would recommend starting on Twitch, because you can at least build an audience there, and you can monetize a lot faster. It's also a really great way to showcase things like publications that you want to show off, or there's a lot of people that I've seen, people who are publishing a system or a game or kickstarting something will go out and partner with actual plays or people who run TTRPG channels to get, kind of going back to what Kayla was saying about the community, to get it out there in front of the community so people know that it exists and know how to access it. I think that's huge. And just being able to sort of provide a space where it can be shown off, it is really helpful for everybody, because the streamer is going to pull in new people who are interested in learning more about the system. The system's going to hit people that are just there to watch the streamer. So it's a nice, there's a nice symbiotic relationship there.
From the art perspective, one of the things you can also do, so yes, there's the art that you put into a book, but one of the things I always clarify whenever I'm doing a book is, can I sell this outside of this? Stock art is always an option. So I have that set up with Shango, for example, where any of the art that I use in there, I can also use as stock art for another project. And that's actually a pretty solid way to generate sort of a side income, because it's a whole lot cheaper to get stock art than it is to commission an artist for, a book. Additionally, though, for artists, there is just commission work on the side. So something that necessarily won't get published or go into a book. That can be kind of iffy depending on the hits that you get, and what you may or may not be willing to draw, etc. But they are definitely viable ways to add to the publishing income.
Yeah. I mean, I may have a slightly, not controversial, but difficult answer to this, which is, I see a lot of people especially like on Twitter, you know, occasionally advertising services. I can do podcast editing or this. And like, to me, that looks a lot like people undervaluing their skills. Like writing, I could do podcast editing, should be writing audio editing, which is a paid job you could do outside of podcasts. Like that's a skill. If you know how to use Audition or something like that's a skill you can do. And you know, the fact is like I have more or less strategically sold out my whole career. You know, I have worked in educational games. I currently work for a company that makes like health apps. Think something like Fabulous. And I work as a narrative designer and game designer to gamify a health app. That pays quite well because, you know, it's some venture capital startup, so they're just throwing money out. Like I have always designed games privately, as extracurricularly, you could say, and then used those as portfolio pieces to get professional jobs. Now, obviously, would I like to just work professionally full-time in strictly entertainment games? Of course. But the skills you're going to get from writing, designing, producing content like audio or video, those are transferable skills, like very transferable skills. And you shouldn't restrict yourself to only working exactly in the like precise creative way you want to. And not that I would fault anyone for not being willing to sell out. It's not, you know, I felt bad about it for a couple of years, but like I've come to terms with a bit of that, but like I do not consider the 8 hours during the midday of my week to be the most important work I do. That's the work I do to pay rent. The most important work I do is the work I do in the afternoons and on the weekends. That's what's important to me. But I have never gotten a job from my college degree. I have a degree in physics, which who cares? But I got my first job because I made a bunch of Game Crafter board games and won a contest. Got my second job because I won a game jam. I got the job I have now because of some random stuff I did in my free time. Like, these are transferable skills. Don't count yourself out. And like I was telling them sort of before the camera was rolling, and I can't quite say, I have been pushing on this for a while. I now have an interview next week at a very substantial real game company that I wouldn't have been able to get if I hadn't continued to make a portfolio of weird stuff. And I don't think this company cares about the healthcare work I've done. I don't think they care at all. But that kept the roof over my head while I worked on important stuff. So it's a difficult answer. It took me some years to come to terms with selling out, but you can sell out and then you can unsell out afterwards. You can go back.
Yeah, you just have to maintain some kind of contact in it, you know, or else you have a much longer climb to get back to who's who out there. I have a question back for B before we move on to anyone else, any other answers. Is when you gave when you worked with them to resell your art as stock, did you get paid less from them because they knew you were going to be reselling it in another way?
In the case of Shengo, no, because again, we generally just split profit down the middle. He generally does all the writing, I generally do all the art.
Okay.
In the other cases where I've done art, etc., I do end up taking a bit of a hit on the upfront payment just because I know I'll be making that additional income on the side. But honestly, I think a lot of it would just be on a case-by-case basis with whatever the person would be comfortable. If they want to pay you more, like, let them pay you more.
Yeah. I did something very similar with a writer recently. We have we went out and we found a mainstream fantasy writer and asked him to write a short story for what we're going to be doing with a Kickstarter later in the year. And he asked us whether he could resell it later. So in part of the negotiations, I said, well, we'd like a year of exclusivity. And then after a year, if you want to go sell it in the mainstream market, we'd be okay as long as it's not another game company. Because he writes in the mainstream market. So he'll probably want to publish it in, you know, anthologies or sci-fi or fantasy magazines or books. And he was amenable to it. He thought, yeah, it's a great idea, no problem. And he's happy because he's never sold into the fantasy, into the TTRPG space which I think is interesting because he's a fantasy writer, but he hasn't really got into this space. So for him, it's us introducing him to a new audience, which he's excited about. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that can be done to help make your collaborations with creators better for everybody. And I know people say, oh, but you won't have exclusivity. After a year, who cares? All your buyers are buying in that first year, or almost all of them. The few that are left in a year, they'll be here or there, you know. You have a year. You basically have a year window to make your money on almost any product in this industry.
And I will also say, if you're going, or if you're trying to do it alone, like without a team or without like partnerships, to extend the possibility of money, learn how to do as much of it as you can. Like I used to have to outsource layout, and then I learned Affinity Publisher, and now I can do my own layout, and that's a massive save for me on projects, and a massive time save too, because I don't have to reach out to someone, negotiate, get an agreement, send the thing to them, wait for a preview, review the preview, send back edits. Like, I could just do it. And yeah, I could send it to someone to be like, hey, can you just check that I didn't do anything dumb in it? And like, there's no glaring issues. And then I used to spend a lot of money on maps. And then I learned how to make my own maps. So like, that's another massive save. So if you really are doing it by yourself, and you're outsourcing a lot of things, just kind of think, what can I learn to do and what can I not learn to do? Like, I am realistic in that I know I do not have the patience nor the time to get good at making art, like portrait art, item art. My art lane revolves in like electrical diagrams. Like, that's the extent of my art skills. But I can translate that to making maps, because there are tools out there like Incarnate and things where I can maybe commission an artist to say, hey, I need these custom assets done, upload them to Incarnate, make my own map, because that software is designed to make maps for publishing in games, and then be like, okay, that's done. I can do layout. It takes a little bit to learn, but once you get used to doing it, and if you're going to do a series where you know it's going to have the same look over and over again, you just make a template for that layout, and that's so much quicker. It saves you time and money at that point. So if you're doing it by yourself, realistically take stock of what you're capable and not capable of learning, and then focus on outsourcing the ones that you can't.
I want to go back to something that Daniel said a second ago. Daniel started to say something about, you see people on Twitter saying like, I can do podcast editing and that kind of thing. Don't make it so that you're saying, I'm desperate for work. Make it so that it sounds like, hey, I have time in my schedule now if anybody's looking for help. You want to come across busy, because then people are going to think, oh, this is somebody I've been wanting to work with, or this is somebody that maybe I should work with, because now they have time in their schedule, so this would be a chance to jump on it. Instead of making it like, hey, I'm desperate for work, somebody please hire me. Yeah. It's maybe that's more of a personal like thought, but that's how it reads to me when I see somebody post that is, I'm desperate for work, please hire me, oh my God. As opposed to someone who understands the value of the work that they do and, is putting it out there as like, hey, I can do this professionally for you. Let me take this off your plate kind of thing, because now I have some availability. So it's some of it's just in how you market yourself as a professional. So, maybe if that like, I really need the work isn't working for you, try tweaking the way that you're posting your availability and see if that works better. Yeah.
We have run a little bit over the intermission time. Let's hop to an intermission. The other questions that are in chat, I'll get to those when we get back, but want to make sure everybody has a chance for their bio break. So we'll see you in a few minutes, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We do have questions that were asked before we had taken our break. Let me start with one of those. So where do you as writers think the line is for let the GM figure it out? They find themselves often going back and forth between extreme clarity and extreme crunch.
I tend to. It's funny because this is almost a constant conversation I have with other folks on the team. Is we go back and forth. I tend to be the GM will figure it out. Give them the information they need. Of course, make everything as mechanically clear as you can. Don't make it like hard to parse. But when it comes to like edge case scenarios of like how will this item interact with this specific spell or ability, I tend to say, the GM is probably already doing this stuff 20 times a session. It's not like this is a brand new problem you're throwing their way. And a lot of times trying to account for every possible interaction can just lead to bloat within your product, and it can lead to just a what would normally be a pretty clean and short section of something just kind of expanding beyond all reasonable control. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm a little bit too far in that direction, so I'm glad I have my team to pull me towards the middle ground.
Yeah.
It honestly depends on what I am writing, right? So, like, if it's a monster, a magic item, I'm not going to try and account for every use case. Let them use it how they want to, let them augment it how they want to. You do you, boo. But I think if you're trying to go for a very specific, like, themed adventure where you want to make sure that there's something that the players take away specifically from it, whether that be, like, an "are we the baddies" moment or something like that, you try to account for as many branches in your story as you can to try and help the DM, because yes, the DM can handle that on the fly if they've done it for a while. I do it all the time. But maybe them handling it on the fly loses that messaging that you're trying to do, or loses that thing you want the players to take away from it. So trying to account for at least the start of as many branches as you can. Like, oh, if the players go full chaos and set this building on fire to get rid of the evidence, here are the outcomes and consequences of that. If they just decide to turn themselves in and be like, we didn't do it, I'm being framed, what happens from that? So if it is an adventure, I try to, like a full adventure, I try to account for as much of this, at least start of the branches as possible. If it's a one-shot, realistically, I will be like, here's the main path, here are like little, like those little GM notes you see in all of the products where it's just like a little blurb of like, here are things you can account for if other stuff happens. But yeah, I just handle it on like a, not necessarily case by case basis, but like what am I writing? What is my goal?
Yeah. So the question was, where do you as writers think the line is for let the GM figure it out? They find themselves back and forth between extreme clarity and extreme crunch. Anyone else want to tackle an answer in there, or was that enough to answer it?
I would say that I maybe unfortunately also come down on the side of like giving too much. I think from my experience running D&D and often feeling adrift without enough information, I tend to default. I think because, and again, this might be personal, I find it easier to ignore written material than to make something up. It's easy enough to go like, this book is being way too detailed about this character. I'm gonna do what I want to do, but not having that detail can be scary sometimes. I think I mentioned it earlier. Just like that list of like random scrabbly thief names in the book saved me 2 sessions ago. I had to name a guy, and I didn't have to say Kyle. Like, it just gave me more. It just gave me a little bit more.
Yeah.
I tend to fall on the side of a little bit more, but that's because I want to have a little bit more. So. Yeah,
I think I because I'm neck deep writing this like 50 plus page adventure. I'm in that mindset of I'm already looking at my page count like, how did I get here? I was 20 pages a day ago. What happened? And so in this case, I am thinking about like just trying to keep it tight, like brilliant brevity, that kind of thing. But no, when it comes to magic items and monsters, I think and especially with things where like a one shot, like Kayla said, you can kind of let some things go. There aren't really lasting consequences. But when you're writing something that, you know, could affect an entire campaign, that whole kind of thing, you do feel inclined to add more detail and want to be as specific as you can about it, because, you know I would feel bad if I knew that something I made, a DM tried to use it and then it just totally messed up their campaign because of some unseen problem. So no, I definitely see what you're saying there, Daniel.
My general thought with almost any kind of writing is you have to write like you're writing for the person who knows the least about it. So, you know, I feel like it's better to write more and let the GM decide not to use something than to not include something and to have them be like, I don't know how to use this now.
Yeah. All right, so this is a question that I wanted. It was like one of the ones that I had marked. I was like, I have to ask this. Has becoming a creator in this industry changed your relationship to playing or DMing in the industry?
Absolutely.
Irreparably.
Yeah, I think it's impossible not to have it change, at least to some degree. I mean, I'm grateful that for the most part, I just love it more now. I love, especially playing in games where my friends who, you know, are not at all, they don't want to try to make D&D content for everyone else. They just want to run their home game, and it's their homebrew world, and there is a lot of creativity that comes from not being bound by the mindset of I'm trying to make this so that maybe someone else can use it, and just being like, no, I'm making this because it's fun and it's awesome. And we're like, my friend ran a campaign where we started at 20th level and he just gave us boons continuously, and it was off the wall and wild, and I enjoyed it more for the fact that I didn't feel like, you know, and part of me even while playing was like, oh, I wonder how that could be something that like other people could actually use in their campaign. And a lot of times the answer was no, absolutely not. That's crazy to, you know, give everyone in the party true sight forever. That's kind of a wild thing to do. But you know, in this case, it was great and it made the game better. So yeah, it's definitely changed my relationship with it. But I honestly think for the better overall.
Yeah, I mean, mine's a little bit of a feedback loop because I actually started looking to getting into publishing because, like, I was using my same set of like homebrew rules and mechanics and things over and over again. And every new game I brought it into, the players were always like, "Oh my god, this is so awesome! Like, I haven't seen this before." And I was like, "Dang!" So like now I gotta make it a thing, I guess. But it's been a feedback loop because the homesteading stuff that I did for the Adventures Domestic Handbook, that started out in my home game because they were like, hey, we want to do a home. What does that mean? Like, how do we do that? How do we do that reasonably without taking a lot of like screen time away from the things we want to do? Is it going to benefit us at all to do it? Because, yeah, like, technically my character would like to have a home, but if it doesn't do anything for us, like, what's the point of spending money into it? And especially when you get into the higher level, you want some money sinks for your players because they're just the ridiculous 1%ers. You need to get rid of that gold. So how can I even out getting rid of that gold, give them some benefits, and give them a place they feel like they can go back to, because if they go back to a place over and over again, you know, it's established, they'll get deeper into the lore in that one place, they'll become attached to the NPCs in that place, they'll be more involved in the world itself rather than the just killing and going through all of the other, like, towns. But on the flip side, publishing and having to be like, oh crap, someone's gonna have to be able to, like, reasonably read this and use this has made me a better DM in my prep, because even though maybe I'm the only one seeing it, now it's like in a more organized layout way where I understand, oh, okay, I'm going to go through the adventure in this kind of way. I need to set up my own like information like this because that will probably hit these beat points. And then again, feeds back to, okay, yes, I know practice. These are the beat points and the orders that are going to get hit in most of my games 90% of the time. So when I write an adventure, I'm going to show the DM this information first, this information next, like, so that it flows nicely for them to use in their own game.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for just the general act of immersing yourself in game design and it helping I mean, it can help make clear. It's like learning Latin. It'll make English and French and German clearer. You will see underlying patterns that maybe as a player or maybe as a DM you weren't attuned to, at the time. And it's helped me as a DM to be making these supplements and to be working on design, to realize which parts of D&D my group wasn't engaging with. I might have just kind of kept running overland travel and kept trying to it's just in my home game. There isn't overland travel. I've made a homebrew campaign that takes place in one large fantasy Vatican city. I didn't want to do overland travel. My group didn't like overland travel, so we don't do overland travel. They never spent money, so I just stopped having money. It's I don't think it's important to all of you. But realizing that okay, what is the point of money? It's to enable the acquisition of new things. Well, I can have them acquire new things without money. Realizing that I can disconnect these game systems and be if they just want new things every once in a while, and if they want to feel like they earn them, well, I'll just do that through other means. They don't need to track gold. But that's a game design kind of way of looking at something. It's how do I produce an effect with mechanics? So that I think that's always helpful. Just trying to write a module, frankly, it'll just make you appreciate what has been written. Oh man, I don't like this one, and then you try to write one. Oh, no, that was quite good. The hubris to think I could do better. Even that can be nice.
It is definitely, I think, also within video game design and TTRPG design and game design in general, it is a little bit of a Faustian bargain of you are trading a little bit of wonder for knowledge and being able to appreciate it. Because before, my older brother would DM for me and I'd be like, oh my god, this is incredible, coolest thing ever, how does he do any of this? And that sense of wonder was really lovely and wonderful. And learning how it's done, you lose that. But you get to be more knowledgeable about it, and now you're able to share that wonder with other people. And it can be almost without being too sentimental about it, it can be a small act of generosity that you can share that sense of wonder with other people while while finding different parts of it to appreciate when that is gone for you. So yeah.
So let me see what else. There was another question somebody asked: how do you implement an item to fit the setting, art or writing wise? So I'm not sure I quite understand the question. I think they're asking how do you make an item, whatever it is, fit what's being created in the big picture. And I imagine from an artist perspective, it would be how do you make something. If you're doing Lord of the Rings, how do you make it feel like a Lord of the Rings piece versus a piece from Narnia or, what have you? And from a writing perspective, how do you write about an item to make sure that it fits within the setting?
I mean, you have to really understand your setting or the thing you're putting it into first. If you don't, then you won't be able to. You'll make a generic thing that maybe visually fits a little bit, but doesn't really have that enough of a connection to your theme or setting or whatever you're doing for it actually to impact. So you have to know what it is that you want to do. And honestly, I know this is probably dating me, but if I'm having a hard time and I'm I need 50 items for this setting, I will do visual boards to kind of get in the mindset. I will do playlists to try to get me into the headspace. Okay. And then I will just brainstorm out all of the ridiculousness for half hour to an hour. Everything I could possibly think of that pops into my head before I'm then okay, now which of these actually fit this theme? Which of these actually do the thing that I wanted to do? Out of these 200 brainstormed random kooky things, what is a Haro weapon? What is a Haro sandship? What is this actually something you would find in Haro, or is it something you would find in a different type of setting? Does it give more spooky horror vibes, which does not match this? I'll have that off to the side. So if I do a spooky horror thing, I can always pull it back because I'm always, save the things you can't use currently because you could definitely use them later kind of person. So yeah, if you don't know your theme or setting, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you know your theme or setting, you know the uniqueness of it, so you can pull from that uniqueness. If your setting's about fighting gods and god killers and keeping the apocalypse from happening to the world, that's going to be a very different vibe from nations fighting and invading each other, right? Like there might be some overlap, but you're going to get very different visuals and magic items and things, different scale of power items.
Or different from, say, cocktails that Arlena's making that have cantrips in them.
Yeah, exactly.
Very different vibe.
From an art perspective, much like what Kayla said, it's study. It is a lot of study. And if you look at something like Lord of the Rings, there's a really specific art style that goes with it. And it's not one that you can just slap onto a piece of paper and say, look, it's Gollum, or it's a very Lord of the Rings looking thing, because there's so much history that went into it. And I'm only using that as an example, right? You've got Tolkien's study of, Finnish to, define Elven, etc. And all of the world building that went into it. And I'm not saying that, like, as an artist, you need to go that deep, but, I would study the original pictures that went in with Lord of the Rings. I would study the way that they made the maps, and I wouldn't necessarily copy, but I would try to work and integrate my own style into something that's very similar. Now, when we did a botanical guide to Barovia, I did pull a little bit on my background from that one. My undergrad's in botany. I have literally never worked in botany in my life, but with that said, I took a lot of the field work and a lot of making those field illustrations, and that went into, finding a way to meld that into a horror setting. What are the classic things that you would expect from a place like Barovia? It's dark, it's vampire, it's Dracula Gothic, right? So what are those pieces from time periods where that was like the dominant style of book? Mary Shelley, for example, right? What was the art like there? What are the big architectural styles? And that's the stuff that I tried to incorporate into these pieces. From a mechanical perspective, also, a lot of thumbnailing. So much thumbnailing. You don't start off making these humongous pieces. You make tiny little versions of it, and you look for the composition that fits the best. And then, again, not to, I guess, to piggyback off of what Kayla said, I've got a Pinterest board full of all kinds of stuff, right? For each of the books that I do, that has those visual cues, those ideas, and those things that I want to incorporate. With regards to designing the items, though, sometimes it's worked the other way, where I'll draw a thing, and then the writer that I'm working with will go ahead and base the description off of the art. And that's actually kind of fun. Although it's also a huge amount of responsibility, because then every design choice that you make suddenly matters, and every line stroke, every pen stroke may have a deeper meaning. So it's fun to do it either way. But again, the bottom line is you have to know the source material that you're really working off of, or be comfortable developing it yourself. So
I was going to wrench this question back into the career progression thing, whether the asker wants it or not.
Good.
Which is, this is something that has come up, is it is a valuable skill being able to imitate a voice. Just speaking as a writer, being able to imitate another writer's voice. I, for a while, was working on a friend of mine's podcast, and he had written and published many. It was a fictional audio drama podcast, and he had already made some. And it would have been ridiculous for me to come in and write in my voice. The people who listen to that podcast want to hear his voice, and so I can't tell you how to learn that, because I wasn't good at it at first. I just had to practice, but it is a good skill if you want to work in a group or potentially work professionally in writing, to be able to imitate voice. Now, obviously, you should write things in your own voice, and you should hope to one day be forcing other people to write in your voice. But for a lot of your career, you are going to write in other people's voices. And so just like trying to, match an art style through research or through reference, trying to match a written tone is a real skill. And it's not something that I was aware of until I started to work on this podcast, and I basically had to have it explained to me. It was like I pitched an episode. He's like, "That's funny for you, but that's not what I sound like." It's like, oh, right, it's your podcast. I have to make it sound like you. So that's yeah, that is something that I think can be helpful, and again will help you get work. I mean, in the screenwriting industry, spec scripts are, you know, an important currency, and those are written in the voices of other shows. And although there doesn't seem to be spec adventures in the tabletop RPG industry, it'd still be helpful to know that like I can write in a very, you know, Hasbro sounding voice, or I can write in the Kobold Press voice. I know what your stuff sounds like. You know, that could maybe help you get some sort of opportunity. So that's just to pull it back to career. Sorry if that wasn't what you wanted.
And you know, and again, just to add to all of that, also like falling down rabbit holes. For the neurospicy, it is our daily lives, but it is super helpful if you want to make sure something's matching on theme. Like, I went down one last night into the too early AM, where I decided I was going to do a dragon book written from the perspective of a naturalist. And I was like, well, if I do that, then I need a classification system. So let me just generate an entirely fictional magical creature classification system. Well, now I know all of my dragons. I know the classification system, so I could easily vibe check, hey, would this match what I'm trying to do with this book, where it is a naturalist take on, hey, here are all these different dragons. Let me just expand a crazy amount the dragons you think exist, because now there is an order of fungi imitating dragons, and there's an order of aquatic dragons and an order of mineral based dragons. They all have names and there's classes. There's wyvern and there's dragon looking, but they're not technically dragon, and there's the true dragons and all kinds of things. So like, if you go down rabbit holes can be useful. But please do have like a buddy who can tell you, okay, it's like 3 a.m. You need to stop this fictional classification system.
I had the same issue with my home game. I wanted a city that could itself be a sundial, which led me to days of trying to figure out the like astronomical physics of sundials. And as it turns out, you can't just stick a tower in the middle and make a sundial. And like at a certain point, I was boring my wife with it to death, and she was like, "Dan, your players didn't do this research. If you put a tower in them and tell it's a sundial, they'll believe you." Like, oh. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. They'll just believe me. But I want to know that it's always 7 o'clock when the shadow hits the church. You know?
Did the same thing with a tax bracket for an entire city and like the city's regional budget and what they would really spend on, you know, upkeep versus, you know, economic reform. It was ridiculous and unnecessary. And...
But sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's like,
it was so much fun.
I want to know every detail about this. Yeah.
And it will let you vibe check real quick, because if you're like, that does not pass the vibe check after I did this rabbit hole, like, you can get rid of it. Just toss it out the window.
All right, so here's one that is very industry-ish. And it's really across any industry, so if anybody new is getting in, this is what you'll run into. So when you came in, did you know anything or learn anything about editorial guides, art director guidelines, publishing guidelines, and how have you found it easy or comfortable getting that information from the person you're working for? You know, art director will give you a creative brief, you know.
I prefer it. This is a me thing, though. I know not everybody works that way. Some people want like the complete creative freedom to define what the art style for this thing is. But I work really well with boundaries, etc. And as an artist, one of the things you find out really quickly is that it doesn't matter what somebody pitches to you. They have a really specific mental picture of what this thing is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to be. And your first draft will not match it. So having that sort of guideline of like, okay, I want, I'll do an example of an item that I made recently, right? Drew, not made. It's a lute, but it's a lute that is carved very intricately with clouds and angels in the middle of it, etc. I did fall down my own rabbit hole on lute construction in the Renaissance. Who the hell does that? Like, But
everybody
with
in
that
this
said,
industry.
yeah, but no, it was something. Wow. But then getting that feedback from Ben in this particular case to say, this is what I have. What do you need to add to this? It took a while to get used to it. And it was really hard hearing that the things that I'd spent a long time on were not what he wanted. That sucked the first time. That was absolutely terrible. But then you learn to sort of take the feedback, not personally, but, to better match the brief or to better read or know what to ask for future projects down the line. When it comes to writing, though, there's a reason I edit the most of our stuff and not really write it. I look at the style guide for DN's Guild and I'm like, nope. I have no idea what you all want.
Yeah, I mean, that's often the first question I have for someone if I'm taking on freelance work for them or if I'm doing like work under a publisher is like, hey, do you have a style guide? And if they don't, I'll go look at like a handful of their products, come back with what I think their style guide is, and is like, do you want me to match this? Or
That's
do you not
definitely the way
care?
to go about it.
do you not care if I match this or not, or do you want me to match this? Because that is going to dictate how I approach this. Like, the first thing I do all the time is make a template and be like, are you okay with me handing it into you in this format? This is what it's going to look like when I hand it to you. Or do you need me to hit different beats in different positions? I've been doing a lot of that since I joined UO Publishing. I'm making templates for everything because I'm like, if we're doing it, we need to be consistent, one, and also I need to know what you want from me because I don't live in your brain, your fantastic, wonderful brains. I do not live there, and I do not live in your house to go harass you at 1 a.m. when I happen to be working on this thing, maybe for you on the weekend. So like,
Maybe time for you to move.
Yeah. I mean, they are close to where my family's from, so maybe I will go and just move down the street for them. But yeah, so that's often the first thing. Like, do you have an established style guide? Do you prescribe to maybe a standard style guide that exists for whatever system you're working in? Do you do anything different if you do? Because there are some who, yes, they say like, I do the D&D style guide, but they might be like, actually, we present monsters a little bit differently because I don't totally vibe with the way D&D strictly presents the monsters, so we've decided to do it this way. It's really, 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 really helpful. And I try to do it in practice for like my own stuff. I tend, for my independent work, to work in like product lines. So like this year, I'm releasing every month the Rogues Gallery, which focuses on a new villain in the Cypher System. So that's my product line for this year. That has a very specific and consistent look every single month. Someone who buys it in January knows exactly what's going to be in it and what to expect in it if they buy the one in June for that villain. And that kind of getting into that practice will let you really just quickly snap to work in things you pick up for freelance or under other publishers, and will make both of your jobs easier, because sometimes you'll get into, if you don't do that, a massive back and forth where they're like, actually, this isn't like everything we need, or it's not what we're looking for. Can you do blah, 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 blah? And like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah. I could have done that initially if you had told me like that's what you wanted, right. Or we had a discussion on what you want. So yes, get used to reading style guides. It can be a little daunting. The D&D style guide I learned as I made, and then learning how to have to mimic and use that is what let me then be able to make style guides and read other style guides. So it can be a little confusing, but I am always a trial by fire kind of person. So in everything that I do. So it is useful. So if you are a publisher out there, or if you do freelance work, please, 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 style guides.
I was just going to add on, and if you are commissioning art, please have a vision in mind. That helps so much, so much. It's happened in the past where somebody will want a piece and they'll go, well, I don't really know what I'm looking for. And I'm like, okay. To give an example of a story in which, I needed an art style guide, it was a big learning experience for me and the person who had commissioned me to do the cover for this. I got a series of things that they wanted. Like, I want a carriage, and I want some horses, and I want this lantern hanging off of this, but I didn't know how any of it fit together. I didn't know if it was supposed to be in color. I didn't know if it was supposed to be in black and white. I didn't know what angle they wanted it at. And I created this entire painted cover. It took me a month and a half based off of what I thought they wanted, and they rejected it. And I had to start back all the way from square one on the same project to redo the cover. And again, that was such a huge learning experience for me to learn what to ask for, and for the person who had never commissioned art like that before to give a very specific idea of what that vision is, with examples, with here is a visual to sort of base your reference off of, because I'm looking for something more like this and not like this. And it's a little different, obviously, for artists than for writers, but as an artist, learning to work off of that and learning to take that feedback with grace is really crucial.
And I will say, cross-industry, a great skill to have is fail faster. If you can figure out a way where if you you turn it in or you ask for feedback at the earliest possible time, so you can find out if you're wasting your time and their time before you continue, so that you can correct early rather than having to correct late in the game where you have had a huge time sink, do it. So, like, if you're like, hey, here's an outline of what I'm going to, fully flesh out for you. Does this look good? Is there anything I'm missing that you wanted hit in this or wanted included in this? Are there things in it that you feel don't maybe fit the thing I'm writing for, if I'm writing for someone else's system or setting? Then, yes, outline is always the first thing I send over. Here's the outline of what I'm going to do. Does this work? Check. Yes, it does. Nope, doesn't. Does it fit what you wanted? Okay. What about it doesn't fit? Let's fix it. Because then I haven't spent hours writing each of the sections, right? I've just outlined, here's what I'm going to hit. And then I also check with them at a draft point where everything's not fully fleshed out yet, but it's a nice halfway point of like, there's enough info in there. You can start to understand what's going to be in it, each section, what the direction and presentation of it is. Does this still fit your vibe check or your setting or what you want from me? Yes, no. What about it doesn't work? What about it do you love and want me to maybe expand more than I had planned on expanding? Like, maybe I had just planned on naming that NPC, but you're like, I love the idea of like a cleric vampire, like, who's running a church in praise to like some sort of like dark cult thing. Can you expand on that more? And I was like, it was only going to be a couple sentences, but yes, he is now a featured NPC
Right.
with more backstory, more understanding, more integral to the adventure. Maybe I pivoted a little bit to be able to do that. So yes, fail faster in any way that you possibly can.
Do the rest of you have anything you want to add to that? Are you good? Okay. All right. So what was... Hold on, I gotta find where that question was. I had a question I wanted to bring up. There it is. Did you have a mentor, someone you looked up to, and what did you learn from them?
So it's funny because despite it's one of the people I'm working on a team with. He goes by D&D Plumbing on Twitter or something. His name's Anthony. Just a very, very smart guy who holds some very different opinions than me on a lot of stuff in terms of design and writing and just like formatting. But he is absolutely the person I've learned just the most from working with, because he's been making, designing game design stuff for just a long time. And so even arguing with him, like, he doesn't believe the wizard class should exist in its current form. He thinks it is flawed to its very core and it's a terrible class. And I'm like, wow, I love the wizard. So I gotta, so talk for a long time about this stuff, and through those conversations my mind isn't necessarily always changed, but I always tend to think about something in a different way, and I think that can often be more valuable and is more likely to happen over the course of a conversation. But yeah, and not to mention he's also kind of a guy who can just do a lot of stuff. He does formatting, he does design, he can do some writing, and so kind of tapping into that and learning those bits of skills from him as well has been really, really useful in coming to understand what goes into making a really fully complete product that people want to look at and buy. So, there's a lot that goes into that beyond the really fun part, which is the writing. I used to think the writing was like, oh, the really intense, difficult part, and it can be. It absolutely can be. But the formatting and art direction and everything else that goes into it can be just as difficult, especially if you're not as, connected to it or used to doing it. So yeah, that was definitely a hard lesson to learn, but I'm grateful there was someone to actually teach me it.
Yeah, I would say I had unintentional mentors. Like, they didn't know they were my mentors, and neither did I at the time. Especially when I first started getting into it, like, your first couple of projects, you're going to have a learning curve. I was in group projects, like I mentioned, with Adam for Animal Sidekicks was like the first thing I ever did. So it was a learning curve of like what I thought it was going to be versus what it was actually. On the back end of things, I wrote in Unbridled, which is a collection by Oliver Darkshire. He ran that project, and like I learned a lot about my perceived what I needed to do for an adventure to make it a thing versus what like actually needed to happen. It was like great feedback at the time, and he was like, I know, you might want to think about maybe doing this, or you don't need to pay as much attention to this, or it's a nice to have, but if you're trying to hit a word count, what do you and do you not need actually? And got kind of the same back and forth discussion when I did Wisdoms and Warnings, the Demon Waste that Alan Tucker ran. That was also a great learning experience. That was not only like an adventure, but that was figuring out how do I do an adventure in an established setting, something that's been around for a really long time, the Demon Waste. How do I do it so it fits in it? Like, what are the elements that I need to pull out from any sort of setting or any sort of thing to make sure that it does fit and feel incorporated into it? So yeah, those have been kind of like my unintentional mentors, and I have been very lucky that they ran large projects, but they had the like kind of grace to take my questions when I was like, well, I know you're giving me this feedback, but how is it coming from? Where is it coming from? What about this, and this? And taking the time to actually like have that back and forth with me when I did have those questions. And I've tried to do that whenever I do like an open project where people can submit to be a writer. I try to be able to provide that same kind of like, they can ask me questions of like, why am I making the decisions I am when I'm going through and like editing or giving feedback on their adventures or the things that they're submitting to me. Because like, I feel like those happen a lot more than like me just picking someone out of the Twitterverse or the internet and be like, I'm your mentor now. Sit down, Sonny. Listen to what it was like in the days before. Like, we don't do that nowadays. You don't get that. So like, making sure you're prepared.
Motherfucker.
Oh, okay. I lost somebody.
Wow,
but
that was weird.
When it comes to designing
Everything
stories,
dropped.
etc., he's been really amazing, and it's just nice to have somebody who has the experience and how to write these things to be able to bounce these ideas off of. From an art perspective, though, there's two. One is Jej Ortiz, really, really great dude, produces some absolutely gorgeous art. Very kind to talk to, very good to, come to with technical questions, but also after a while, once we talk for a while, like actual questions on how do I improve this piece of artwork, right? And I have to be respectful at this time. I don't pay him, but at the same time, it's a nice give and take relationship. I can do the same for him, and he's just been really great with helping my own art. The one that's been the most influential, though, is Paul Scott Canavan. When I first started doing art, I thought I was great. And I had some friends who were like, well, why don't you go to Study Buddies? And if you don't know about Study Buddies, it is something that is run by Paul Canavan, who is a fairly big name artist for Magic the Gathering, a lot of video games. And he takes stock images from around the internet, collects them all in a big archive, and you choose one and you have a paint along with him once a week. And doing that was so instrumental to my own growth, because what I thought was a good picture was not a good picture, as it turns out. I was missing elements of composition, elements of lighting, how to do this within a 2-hour time span, which is really freaking hard. And the amount of growth that I noticed from, when I first started doing it all the way to the end was absolutely astronomical. And he has no idea who I am, no idea, that I have, worked with him in Study Buddies, etc. But the other thing that he was great for is you go through a roll of pieces at the end. If you tag your work on Twitter as Study Buddies, he will go through it with the stream and talk about each of the individual pieces and what looks good and what doesn't. And that was just great from a technical standpoint on learning a lot of the elements, learning what to look for, what are the important parts of a picture that need to go in there if I'm doing a speed paint. So that's the art perspective.
Anyone else want to talk about their mentors? Sorry, we had dropped for a second. It was really
Scott,
weird.
I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
I think you're muted on Zoom.
Yeah, I think you're Zoom muted, not mic muted.
Yes. That was weird. Yeah, we had dropped for a second, and it all came back, thank goodness. But I almost never mute on Zoom. That was really weird that I came in muted. Anybody have anything they wanted to add to mentors? Did you have a mentor, Luna? No? Have you mentored?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, not anyone specifically. Mostly just diving into streaming. It was just kind of picking up little things here and there. So, yeah, not really.
Okay. Well, I think we've reached the end of the stream. I have all these other questions. God, I wish that I could run 10 hours, but that would be unfair to everybody. I do want to thank all of you for coming on, and I'm going to let you run through and say, talk about where you're from and everything, and where people can find you. And at the end, I'd like to send us off to raid somewhere, quickly, and maybe jump in somebody and say hello. So why don't we go backwards this time? We'll start with B and go counterclockwise.
Was not prepared. Yes, I am B. I am at Brassic Arts on Twitter, ArtStation, DeviantArt. It's all the same. Do freelance TTRPG work. I am a redacted number of years veteran of playing various systems: Pathfinder 1E, D&D 2E, 3E, 3.5E, 5E. Let's not talk about 4E. And I have done, just a number of small freelance pieces, but you can pretty easily find me on Twitter. If you ever want to DM me, go for it. I'm happy to chat.
All right, Dan.
I'm Dan. I run a YouTube channel called Untested Arcana. It's about tabletop RPG design, mostly 5e homebrew, but hopefully more stuff in the near future. Actually, there's one video on there, if you look at the thumbnails, it's super different, about designing one from scratch and the kind of important foundational decisions, and that's the one. If you're going to watch one, you should watch that. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube and pretty much nowhere else. So I hope you like YouTube videos. Thanks.
All right, Jackson.
Yeah, I'm Jackson Wagner. You can find me at jwagnerdev on Twitter. That's pretty much where I am, out of necessity. If you want a cool new magic system to add on to your 5e game, Thimbleton Ink Squire's Runic Compendium is going live on Kickstarter tomorrow. It's an awesome PDF, very fun system. I've run it for years, and it really helps kind of expand magic in 5e in a really, really, really interesting way. Yeah, that's me.
All right, Kayla.
I am Kayla, or DM Dalliance, depending on where you can know me from on the web. I have a actual play that starts its first thing tomorrow night here on Twitch under Paracosm Entertainment. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. PST. It will also be available on YouTube the Wednesday after, so if you can't make it for stream, you can see it there. I also have a Substack community that you can find in my link tree. If you want sneak peeks of things like the Rogues Gallery that I've been doing every month that I mentioned in the Cypher System, or I do what I coin as fun free things, where like if I get really bored or get an inspiration, I'll do some silly monster magic item subclass. That's how I have a barbarian subclass where you heal people with your screams. So those go on my Substack as well. And you'll also get sneak peeks. I've been working on like an open TTRPG system that the community can use for whatever they want to. And I've been doing sneak peeks through my Substack for that. I'm also part of UO Publishing, so we have a Kickstarter happening soon with this if you want to do like Treasure Planet meets like a post-apocalyptic water world type situation, go check that out. That's also in the Cypher System. Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at JustThinkingK.
All right, and Luna.
I am Gamer Mom Luna, and you can find me all around social media at Gamer Mom Luna, Twitter, Instagram, Dice Camp. Not TikTok because Gamer Mom Luna was already taken. So on TikTok, I am the Gamer Mom Luna. Because, you know, that qualifier makes a big difference. And you can find me most often doing stuff for shadowmain.com, SHADOMAIN.com. And over there, I write blog posts and do interviews and write reviews. And you can also find me as an interviewer with the Rising Tide podcast. I do interviews. I have one coming up in a couple weeks with them, and I've done a couple with them already, so those are floating around the internet somewhere too. Yeah, so that's where you can find me these days.
All right, and I'm Scott. I'm one half of Zealzaddy. There's actually two of us. You can find us everywhere at Zealzaddy. You can pick up our D&D 5e products that are on Drive-Thru RPG. Look up Zealzaddy, and we'll be the only ones there. We are currently converting some of our product to Cypher and moving to Cypher. We will continue doing some stuff to 5e probably, but it'll be less frequent and usually interesting things that we think would fit well going to 5e from the stuff we're putting into the Cypher, into our own Cypher System product. Let's find someone to raid. Who would be good out there? Let's see who we got. Not Matthew Colville, no. How about Tabletop Notch? That looks good. There's 53 in there. Could be fun. All right. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night, y'all.